The story opens with a man reflecting on his life. After graduating, he took a job in a big city for the last decade. Going to work every morning was shook up by a train full of passengers, a job where perseverance was judged and he was given more and more duties, so his time in the office increased even more. Even on weekends that he rarely gets off, he loses interest in reading his favorite historical novel. Just before falling asleep, our main character reflected on how his life was boring and he was missing his peaceful and beautiful hometown. When he opened his eyes, he felt strange. His hands were small and his body shrank. He tried to look outside from the window, which was a part of the room that he had no idea whose. When he looked at it, he saw a whole different world in front of him. Someone was calling a person named Van. It was Van's maid, Till. She came into the room with panic, telling him that it was dangerous out there. He asked who she was, but Till was confused. He said that the view outside was great and he moved because the garden was so beautiful. Till was shocked and even more confused at how he was using such difficult words and how he could pronounce them correctly because he was 2 years old. Van was not expecting this. Even though he was about to hit 30, he was now a 2-year-old kid. He was a corporate slave office employee who lived in a small one-room apartment in the city, and this body and maid were not his. He was trying to figure out if he was reincarnated or dead. He also had the memories from this life. He asked if her name was Till, his private maid, and Till confirmed him. He also knew that his name was Van Fertio. While Till was praising him for being smart, he started counting his family members like his father Duke Jalpa Fertio and his older brothers Murcia, Yard, and Sesto. There was one thing he didn't know though, he didn't know where he was. In the dining room, all the members of the Fertio family were eating. Father, the head of the Duke family Jalpa Pool Ati Fertio. First son Murcia Elago Fertio, second son Yard Guide, and the third son Sesto. While the family was eating their meal in silence, Van was surrounded by the maids and seemed like he was impressing them by eating his vegetables. It felt like he was in a hostess bar and he was a VIP customer. He still had memories from when he was in Japan and reincarnated in this world. Although he still doesn't understand and doesn't feel that this is real, he decided to do his best. His brother Yard seemed nervous. Their father Jalpa asked him what he learned today. At dinner he would ask how the day's activities to his son, and this was a daily routine at home. He wondered if this was a custom among nobles. They distanced themselves from their children. In the morning they do nothing, and during the day they learn sword techniques and education according to their age. Jalpa then asked Sesto about his day. After learning his too, he asked Van what he was planning to do that day. Van tried to come up with the best answer and stated that since he didn't know anything, he would study the history and culture of this country. Everyone, including Jalpa, was too stunned to speak for a moment. Jalpa then burst into laughter, saying how smart his kid was, even though he was the last son of his wife Mira who spoiled him. Jalpa was sure he had strong fire magic just like him and Mira, and stated that he was looking forward to the coming-of-age ceremony when he was 8 years old. In a world filled with magic like here, it was important to know what kind of magic one possessed and what was suitable for them. And there were 2 requested noble families. Basic 4 elemental magic of fire, water, air, and earth, which was devoted to attack and to protect family and residents, or healing magic, and people who had talent other than that would suffer humiliation. His father and brother, all of them, were compatible with 4 magic elements. In his opinion, any other magic would be useful depending on how it's used. The Fertio family was a noble with a specialization in military power that existed within a large military country. They also had pride, especially in fire type, which was strong in attack. This world should have a civilization that was developing on par with the medieval and early modern worlds. But with magic making things easier, if there was a spread of gunpowder, it would be very serious. The existing weapons were all general weapons such as swords, spears, bows, and arrows. Then the very important thing was magic. This world also had 3 continents and countless islands. And right now he was in a large country located in the southern part of the Grand Continent, which was in the west, Scuderia Kingdom. The royal family here existed for 300 years and had been steadily expanding its country slowly. The current king, too, led the nobles who had fighting power and would attack the small country to get the territory of the new country. It seemed that even his father at that time was promoted from count to duke because of that. He asked Till if there was only one port where ships sailed, because if passing through the deep sea, the ship might be attacked by giant monsters. Even though passing through the strait would be difficult if not using a narrow location. Till explained that other than humans there were also various other races like elves, dwarves, and beasts, but because they built their own culture in the countryside, it was rare to see them. The maids were pretty surprised that his words were very difficult to know. One of them asked if he wanted to take a nap, and he said that he was asking those because he wanted to know a lot. He wondered if they were tired. As they said they were fine, Van continued to ask about the magic equipment. Till stated that some magic stones, minerals, and crystals could store magic power, and it could make magic tools based on magic compatibility. After he learned about magic, he decided to ask the main question to Till later, which was Prodigy. A 49-year-old butler, Esparta, came and asked how far he had remembered. He knew Van was 2 years old and he learned easy letters and numbers. Esparta had been serving his father for many years and he seemed capable. He had not spoken to him until that moment, which made him a little bit sweaty. As he was having trouble answering him, Esparta repeated his question, asking what he remembered so far. He said that it would be okay if he asked him because he couldn't write. He asked him what was 2 plus 3 and he gave the correct answer. He then asked him to subtract 2 from 7 and Van gave the right answer once again. After a minute of silence, Esparta stated that he would be teaching Van himself twice a week from now on. This experience was like hell for Van. What he was teaching him wasn't something a 2-year-old learns, and the learning material was also too much. Esparta was shocked at how genius this 2-year-old boy was. Even though it was pretty hard, he could now read and write and could learn many things such as the noble system, territorial unification, and rules, but he was still trying to understand what a 2-year-old was supposed to do. He learned various things all the time during those 2 years. With a wooden stick in his hands, he was even trying to learn swordsmanship. It felt like he was playing with Maiko in the tatami room. While playing with Till, she wins their battle, and the other maids seem upset that she dared to win against Van and ask him to punish Till. The punishment idea sounded good. Till started to panic, as usually doing something like that would be a huge deal. But Van just flicked her forehead. Even though training was only half a year, every day he learned sword techniques, and after passing the age of 5, he was able to fight by matching the older apprentices called young warriors. With a fairly easy rule, just by hitting the opponent first with a stick, he was the one who would win. And unexpectedly, he was quite deep into it because it was so interesting. As he had participated in lots of different combat sports like judo and karate, he combined those with his sword technique. He would win against his opponents. However, since his opponents were children, the attacks were monotonous after all, and he neither had the skills nor had experience to win against Van. Unlike his brothers like Yard and Sesto, Van was talking to the low-caste people, and they seemed to like him. Deputy Chief of the Knights Group D came and wanted to ask something. He wanted to see his hands. D noticed that he had no peeling skin. His hands were so soft and his nails were long. Van didn't seem to understand what he was doing. He said that although he practiced every night, there was no evidence of that. Van said that he was not practicing at night because he was very busy studying. When he was free, he would practice, and he also liked his sword. D heard that Esparta issued an order to make him study 3 times more than usual. Van now understands why there were so many lessons. D was just excited that he would be the one teaching him about the swords. D said that Van should prefer the path of the sword as he had a natural talent and offered him to do training based on his body. He seemed so excited and proud to be the one who would make Van the one swordsman in this kingdom. Seeing his serious face, Van stated that he loved both studying and the sword, so he wanted to learn both well. There was nothing D could do, so he accepted. Van asked him to teach him kindly, but that was a big lie. He made him practice to almost death and didn't let him rest even a little bit. Even when he found a way to rest, he suggested he rest while squatting. Van considered him as a devil, but after this statement he was sure he was just a big idiot guy. Till came and praised him for fighting every day. Even though it was hard for him because he was reborn, every day was so much fun compared to his old life. The satisfaction he never felt in his previous life, and in his current life, he became the greatest noble family. He was dedicated to enjoying a pleasant life like this. 3 years later, it had been a few years since he was called a prodigy. Suddenly a man was going to swing his sword at Van, ending his lovely life once more. The next chapter starts with us looking at Van's 6-year-old self, that is, 2 years ago. He recalled one of the days he spent out. He thought there were many kinds of people where he lived. He never got tired of seeing that crowd. Van was thinking 6-year-old had lived on Earth for almost 30 years, and still had memories of it. In that world, he was reincarnated as the 4th son of a noble family, and was called a prodigy. Every day he received lessons and training in swordsmanship like it was hell. It looked like 12-year-old child soldiers could not beat 6-year-old Van. He could learn things like adults learned, which was clearly too quirky. Van's personal maid, Till, told him that he was able to master swordsmanship so cleverly like he was a genius. That way, she said, maybe he could catch up with his brothers and become the head of the family. In politics, the weak would fall prey to the strong. One of the strongest should have been the head of the family. But Van's life this time was completely different. Money, status, honor, power would all belong to a family head. Therefore, while having a very promising sibling in the future, as he thought, trying to kill to prepare faster was a sight often seen in aristocratic society, and fortunately Van could not say that he was on good terms with his brothers. He thought they would not hesitate to kill him. In other words, regardless of whether he would actually become the head of the family or not, if he stood out, he would most likely be killed. At that rate, he wouldn't be able to enjoy his life in peace till he wanted to go to play outside. That was why he would change from being a prodigy to an ordinary child. He had decided to become a player, and for now he thought he would start with shopping. Van went to Marie Company, which was a large company with branches all over the kingdom. Van told Till that it was big like Costco. Then suddenly a man was coming with a child's hands tied and yelling at him. The child was wearing ragged clothes. Van wondered what was happening. The man who held his son's rope told people around that it was not a show. The man said he was free to do anything to his own child and his debt was in his name, so he came to sell him as a slave. According to the law of slavery, there were only two types of slaves allowed, namely slaves for debt and slaves for committing crimes. However, long ago in poor families, the children who were left and not fed would be sold as slaves and used as living expenses. The father said he used him for the debt transaction system, and he made him a debt slave. Van understood that the reason why he could not take his eyes off and make a sound, even with such a terrifying appearance, was maybe because slavery was quite common. Everyone was used to seeing that kind of scene, which was actually a very bad system for Van. Then a woman noticed Van and asked him if he might have been the son of His Majesty. Till said he was that famous Prodigy. The woman said her name was Rosalie and thanked him for his patronage. She said as she thought he was the rumored Van, then welcomed him to Mare Company. She asked him what he was looking for, and then told him that they would show and prepare anything for him. He asked Rosalie how much the child as a slave would cost. She said he was about 8 years old and then asked his father what his magic power was. The father said his magic ability was stealing. In that case, she said it could not be more than 3 big silver coins. The father got angry and told them in the shop each slave was valued at 5 large silver coins or more. He said a slave could last a long time, it was only natural that it was more expensive. Rosalie said any shop would buy less than half the selling price even though that kid should only be given 3 big silver coins. She said if women were to be multiplied, men and their small bodies were of no use. Including the maintenance costs, it would have been cheaper. While the father was getting angry, Van told him to wait and then asked him if he was his son, to treat him gently. The father told him to shut up and to not butt in. Rosalie also got angry and told him to not be stupid. She told him that they didn't need to buy it. She asked if he wanted to sell, even if it was just a lie to that kid. The father said they all always fooled him. He had no intention of selling it to her either. He pulled his son and told him that they were going to another shop. The son was really hurt. Suddenly Van stopped them and told them he would buy him 5 silver coins. He was trying to be calm and was thinking he had a feeling that if he just got carried away, the child would be killed. The father asked Van where the money was. Till told Van that she only prepared gold coins. Rosalie told Till to exchange the money inside and wanted them to leave it to her. Rosalie and Till went to pay the father. Meanwhile, Van was trying to talk to the son. He asked him if he was all right and if he could stand up. He told the son that his name was Van and then asked his name. His name was Kamshin. Van told him now he was free and could go wherever he wanted. Till asked Van if he bought the child as a slave, however. Van just thought that he should have helped him. Till was afraid that his father would do something to him, so Van thought if he got lost alone on the road it would be troublesome. Moreover, he didn't know anything, and Van could not be that irresponsible. He asked Kamshin if there was somewhere he could go. Kamshin was silent, and then he asked him if he wanted to come to his house. He said he thought there was some work he could do to help out at home. One of the other boys told Van that he would be allowed by His Majesty to bring an unknown child into the mansion, unless he took him as his slave. Van asked him if he was okay with that. Kamshin nodded his head and said okay. Then Van told him to have a look at the clothes first, and from now on, as they would be together, he wanted them to dress up cool. Rosalie told them before that they had to make a slave contract first. Rosalie took Kamshin's hand and then a mark appeared on his hand. Rosalie said it was the mark of a slave contract and only slaves would be marked unless the contract was broken. She was a contract magician. She said as for the contract fee, this time she would make it free since that was his first visit. Van thanked Rosalie and she was shocked that she got thanks from a noble. Rosalie showed them the way and assisted them. Rosalie asked Van at first if he wanted to choose clothes for Kamshin. Van took his hand and requested him to come and buy some clothes for him. He was kind of surprised. They went to a store and Van took him to a good part of the store. Van chose a side and didn't think clothes like that would not feel weird. However, Rosalie told him it was made of very good cloth and then showed him another one and told him that one was generally used by slaves. Van said he didn't mean to see him as a slave and the outfit he chose was pretty good for him. After that, Van said he would go to buy some underwear and shoes too. Rosalie thanked him and told him that there were nice shoes to match the outfit. Van recalled the day and thought that was the situation on the first day he went out. He bought a slave. Now he thought everything would be fine. Then Kamshin came to Van and told him that Deputy Commander D was looking for him. Van handed him a cookie and asked him for that, telling him that he was not there. However, Kamshin thought he might have already found out, then took the cookie and ate it. Van realized he was not wearing gloves. Kamshin told him that was not necessary. Van asked if he felt bad when people looked at it. He said it was a sign of bonding with him. It should have been shown instead. He said it was not something that could be shown like that and bought gloves for him. He immediately put on the gloves and told Van that he would wear them as he brought them. Kamshin went back to Deputy Commander D and told him that Van didn't seem to be there. Deputy Commander D was surprised to hear that he said some witnesses said that Vanna entered that room earlier. Kamshin told him that it was probably just an illusion due to his strong feelings for Van. Then Commander D yelled and asked him why there was food left in his mouth. Until now there was nothing left, he said. He said now he got Kamshin and told him that he was disregarding the orders of the Deputy Soldier Commander. That was very courageous indeed. He said he was Van's slave. Commander D told him that he would say it again, then told him that he had gotten a lot of guts and told him to replace Van, let the commander train him, and told him that he should have felt honored. Van was secretly listening to them and thought what a pity for Kamshin. Then he started to think thus, he had the habit of being lazy. He thought there must have been an achievement for going from a prodigy to an ordinary child. He thought if Kamshin gave up, he would take his place while looking at him and Deputy Commander D leaving. In the next chapter, people were talking about Van's birthday. He was turning 8, which meant it was time for the magic appraisal ceremony. They were really looking forward to the result of the ceremony as he was an extraordinary prodigy. Fertio's family's sons were all people who had magic compatibility with the 4 magic elements fire and wind, so there was no doubt Van would also be compatible with fire magic. However, in the ceremony, Van had no magic element that matched him. He had a creation magic. People who possess it are the most unfortunate magic users among all types of magic. That magic was also called alchemy. Preparing materials such as iron and copper, working with images in your head, and making swords and accessories consumes quite a lot of magic power and can't make anything further. Using a large amount of magic power to make weapons and decorations could also be made by people who have other magic compatibility. Neither an inventor nor a blacksmith need any magic talent to make it. Van's life was not targeted by his brothers in the power struggle. He had done many things to lower his rank for 2 years, and there was no way a low rank could affect his magic compatibility. The things that a noble needs are 4 magic elements: fire, water, wind, and earth. In the Fertio family, those with strong fire magic or even healing magic compatibility were especially expected. The eldest son, Mercia, had wind magic, and he worked harder than anyone and held the position of the family head representative. However, just because he had wind magic compatibility, he was despised by the second and third sons who had fire magic. Even so, among nobles, magic was very important. His father, Yalpa, didn't think it was possible to give birth to a creation magic user as his wife, and he had strong fire magic users. Van's mother, who had a weak body in contrast to the strength of her magic power, died after giving birth to him, and that's why his father had high expectations from him. Jalpa then took out his sword and stated that since he was young, he had shown a strange talent, and he was a fool for expecting much from him. Therefore, he said that the Duke family would not be held back. He did not want anyone to know about this matter, so he said that he had to kill him. Van didn't know what to do, and he couldn't even move. However, Mercia, the eldest son, protected Van, and when Yalpa asked what was the matter, he said that there was an area within the Duke family's territory that he was currently occupying. However, due to its location, it was completely undeveloped. There was also a village in that remote area. He suggested leaving that area to Van. It was part of the territory Mercia got when he was promoted to the Duke, and it was also the place where Count Ferdinand, whose territory had been reduced, sent knights to be judged. In other words, if he left that village to Van, even if placing a knight right next to Count Ferdinand, there would be no problem. Besides, the newly acquired territory still had some loyalty to his Duke's family, and if a member of the Duke's family was assigned there, even if it was only in appearance, it would be good. Yalpa seemed pleasant with this idea. He said that he was going to leave him in that village as a feudal lord. He told him to get out of there as soon as he finished preparations, and left there after telling Mercia that he finally found worth in him. The moment they left, Mercia kneeled in front of his brother and apologized. He couldn't stand to see his little brother having a hard time getting creation magic. He had always been mistreated by his father and brothers because of his wind magic attribute. He was okay with Van hating him for giving unreasonable advice like that. Van wasn't even close to hating him. Mercia helped him, and if it wasn't him, Van would be killed or arrested, or his tongue might even be torn out and he would most likely be made a slave. In a desperate situation like this, he promised to not waste the chance his brother gave him. Mercia was continually impressed by Van's intellectual brilliance and often found himself pondering where Van had picked up such eloquent vocabulary. He was convinced that Van considered matters with a depth that surpassed his own. From the very beginning, Esparta and Till were always eager to share updates about Van's achievements and growth. The Duke family had decided to relocate Van to a distant locale, an endeavor that was expected to be quite challenging. Nonetheless, Van was prepared to give it his all. Mercia expressed his acceptance of the situation, stating that he was content as long as it benefited Van. They exchanged a firm handshake and Van expressed his gratitude to his brother. Back at the family home, Till was visibly upset, vehemently protesting that even without magical abilities, Van remained a wise and respected nobleman. She found the decision to send him to a remote village completely preposterous. Despite this, the role of a feudal lord held its allure. With a gag order in place, Van reassured her, appreciating her concern, and surprisingly confessed his excitement about the new chapter waiting for him in the village, a reaction Till had not anticipated. Van realized that remembering the contrast between ordinary life and the rigidities of aristocratic expectations meant that he could now consider himself a free man. Assuming the duties of a feudal lord in a small village would likely afford him plenty of leisure, prompting him to think about how he should spend this newfound free time. Reflecting on the painful memories of being left by his father and brothers, he resolved to turn the village into his cherished retreat, a place where he could live comfortably and joyfully. In the next chapter, nobles spout all kinds of rhetoric to make themselves feel proud, but in the end, their priority is to protect themselves, not the kingdom, even if it means neglecting the security of their people. In other words, nobles would look down on civilians, especially adventurers. In this chapter, a group of people were discussing their mission to guard a noble's child. As they can't deal with royalty, they had to accept this. The biggest one among them asked why he accepted the request, and he explained that it was because he had no choice. Van came like sunshine, smiled at them politely, and introduced himself. Ordo, who seemed like the group leader, was shocked at how cute Van was, and he also responded politely. Van started to praise Ordo, and he noticed his weapon, which seemed pretty big and heavy. The other members of this adventurer group also seemed interested in Van, and Van was amazed by them. After meeting everyone, Van left. They all seemed pretty pleasant, the fact that the person they would be escorting looked like an ordinary adorable child. But Ordo still warned them to be careful to not pat his head. Meanwhile, Van was with Kamshin and they were preparing for the trip. He told him to put his luggage in those 3 horse carriages. He explained that this escort could not borrow carriages from the Knight Army, therefore Mercia hired adventurers. At first, they were only going to send a single carriage for him, but Mercia did not let that happen. Till was also going with them. She was dedicated to serving Van everywhere, so she was also going. The information that he possesses magic other than the 4 basic elements was only known by a few people. But he can't stop people from talking. Dee also came to accompany him and promised to plunge his swords into anyone who gets in Van's way. Van asked if he was allowed to request an escort from the Knight Army, and Dee didn't know about this either. He told the others to hurry up and get everything ready. Esparta came and stated that it was a little bit early for Jalpa, but he would be retiring soon. His children were all grown up, so there should be no problem with him coming with Van to the countryside to relax. Esparta worked alongside his father for years, so it would not be easy to let him go, and it would be difficult to replace such a trusted servant. But still, Esparta was going to watch Van's studies while he was enjoying his retirement, which made him pretty nervous. Van noticed that everyone brought so many things as if they weren't going to a village, but still he was grateful that there were so many people by his side. Dee with his high spirits and Espada with his extensive knowledge. Till asked if something happened, seeing his weird smile. Van smiled like a normal person and then stated that he was just glad everyone was coming with him and thanked them. Till mentioned that many maids like her wanted to join him, but only she was allowed because she asked Mercia for this chance. She said that Mercia seemed to be busy and didn't talk much with the maids. Yard and Sesto don't treat them properly, but Van was different. He used to greet them every day. He gave them treats, and when they cleaned, he would come to help them. The maids who participated in sword training also liked Van. Van felt embarrassed and told Kamshin that if he didn't like it, he could just stay in the kingdom. The slave agreement could be changed or cancelled, and if he asked Mercia, he would grant it. Kamshin told Van that he had decided to devote his life to him forever. Van got super embarrassed, so he tried to joke around asking him if he liked him that much, but Kamshin responded with all seriousness that he liked him and adored him. Now it was time to go. Van was thinking that his dad wanted to get him out of town without anyone knowing. He had to erase his existence as much as possible. He thought he spent a lot of time in that town in the last 2 years, but now, it feels lonely. While they were about to leave, a girl approached Van and called out to him. He said she was the daughter of a guard he had met several times. She asked Van if he was going somewhere. He asked where she heard it. Then the girl pointed to something, and when Van looked at it, he saw a man was behind them with his horses, which he thought was so embarrassing. The soldier said, as per instructions from Mr. D, they would be sad if Van left town like a thief on the run. He said at the least they wanted to give him a proper send-off. The soldier told Van that D was sleeping in the carriage, so when he was awake, he would let him know. Then D awakened and screamed that the 4th prince of the kingdom, Van, was there. He ordered people to clear the road to let him through, and if any officer asked permission, he would check up on him. People approached and asked Van where he was going, wanting him to come home soon and asking him if he was going to school in the royal capital. Van said goodbye to everyone and thought he didn't think that they cared so much about him. Meanwhile, Till got emotional and started to cry. A man approached Van and told him that the beef barbecue was ready. Van thought they had to pass through 2 cities, but before that, they set up camp for the first time. He thought in his previous life he had the experience of living in a car, but this was his first time camping in that dangerous world full of monsters. This time, he asked 2 groups of adventurers to escort him. The man who brought the beef barbecue was named Orthosheet. He seemed to be the leader and a talented adventurer who had been an adventurer for more than 20 years, so he was used to interacting with clients. Even in the face of an 8-year-old like Van, as he thought, could speak decisively. Van thanked him for the beef and for taking care of him, then he requested Ortho to take some time to rest. Till was aware that even adventurers could understand Van's kindness. She thought if Van became a master like her, they could talk about 100 more amazing things. Van was thinking after leaving the town and crossing 2 cities he camped several times. He reviewed what they had seen. They saw 4 more cities, big and small, where they rested a whole day. He was thinking about the fact that the progress was slow because they had a lot of luggage. After 2 weeks, they were walking between 50 and 100 kilometers per day, and now they had covered 500 to 1,000 kilometers. The kingdom was vast. In Japan, it was like going through 3 or 4 prefectures, but he wondered what the actual distance was. Till told Van that they would soon arrive at the village finally. Van thought it was like when a workplace had a new boss transferred in. First impressions were important. While he was thinking, as soon as they entered the city, the carriage stopped and Van asked what was wrong. The man holding horses' ropes told them the situation was bad because the village was under attack. Van, along with all the adventurers, Kamshi and Till, were lined up in a circle and discussing what to do, and they all tried to make a plan. One said they might have been bandits or mercenaries on the run. One said anyone who felt weak and disputed could back off, and one said he was used to fighting. The village was surrounded by solid thick wooden walls, so it would be very difficult to use arrows. In front of the gate, armored troops stood guard, and behind them there was an army of magicians. Villagers could only take refuge like turtles. Dee wanted Van to let them join the battle because he believed if they all worked together, as he said, they could be defeated. Van thought the opponent's numbers should have most likely been 40 to 50 people. He asked himself if they should have fought in a situation where they didn't know what their opponent was like. Orthosheet said it was too dangerous. Dee told him that he knew it and there would be injuries and even death, but everybody could accept that. Ortho said he had his principles. They didn't accept requests that required sacrificing party members. He told him that if he became an adventurer, he must have often experienced those kinds of conditions. Ortho said if he had risked everyone's life, they would have been dead long ago. Dee turned to the crowd and asked if there was anyone who wanted to risk their life. He said the village became his lord's first territory, as did the villagers. If a crisis came, he said, he couldn't help but draw his sword. Ortho told Dee that he was indeed a good knight, but that had nothing to do with them. He said even if he paid more, it was all over if he died. He continued that at least he would like to request an escort for Van. He said depending on the situation, they may have escorted them. Esparta refused it and told them Dee would be more than willing to die for others. He stated that Dee alone was able to face over 30 people, including an army of mages, and he said he thought that would be 50-50. He said if Dee died this time, no one would rule the village, and he said they would not fight. Even if I died first, Esparta said. He was still a 4-element mage. He said it was where the open area was and they could see their fighting power. Ortho was surprised that he could fight. Esparta told everybody that they didn't have to take any risks. First, he would build a barrier wall. Adventurers had to attack from behind the barrier from a distance. When the enemies turned their gazes, at least it was his plan, their chances of winning would be high if the surprise attacks were repeated. Ortho asked if their magic power attacks could be prevented because he believed that there was no way to prevent them other than shooting them with arrows. Van said one cart was lined with iron at all vital points and it was fine to get into the cart and escape after making the first surprise attack. He said their only goal was to distract the enemy first. He asked if Esparta stayed behind and confronted them. Esparta approved it and told him that as bait, he had to keep attacking from behind the wall, otherwise Dee and the others would die. Van didn't like to hear what Esparta said as he thought that he would surely die. Esparta finally said that he, as an old man, would be more useful. He wanted Van to allow his request, then Van would be the bait. They all looked at Van and were ready to listen to him. Till jumped in front of Van and she said no. She told Van that she opposed that proposition and would not allow them to do that. She said if Van became the bait, she would rather that she face the enemies. She said if they got distracted and attacked her, she was sure that they could win. Kamshin said she was coming too. Van said to let him remind them all again, then told everybody that he was in charge there. He said he would discuss that possibility, and Orto and others would escort him to the village. He said that didn't include fighting to save the village. He told Esparta, who had retired from a noble family, that he had contributed greatly to Van's family and must have not died in that place. He said Dee and the other knights' squad were serving his father, not him. He said he had to apologize to his father if anything happened to them. He turned to Till and told her that he already thought of her as his older sister who spent more time with him than anyone else, and didn't want to see someone as important as his sister die. Then it was Kamshin's turn. Van told Kamshin that he really liked his honesty even though he was Van's slave. He didn't have to die for him. Van told Kamshin that he was glad Kamshin was enjoying his life. Van started to think that for him, who was known as incompetent and got kicked out of a noble family, everyone who wanted to follow him was amazing and kind people, so he could not let them die. Just giving orders and doing nothing, he would never be like that damn boss. He, as the person in charge, must have put himself on the front line. He wanted to sincerely apologize to them. Van started to talk. He said first he would take the cart, and then advance from the front. He said he wanted everyone to attack from left and right. However, he said he told them not to forget that ranged attacks were the main attack there. He said if the enemy didn't retreat, they could run away and leave his body there. He stated that even if he got killed by the bandits if they didn't reveal his identity, the duchy wouldn't worry. Now, Ortho was okay with risking their lives. Van called Ortho a brat and told him that he said he would risk his life for the responsibility. Ortho told Van that if he said more than that, he would have had to scold the whole party. Puriel said honestly she had already been fooled by the nobles, and so far she had only seen nobles who could only talk. However, Van could remember their names one by one. That was why they wanted to risk their lives, as she said, and everyone felt the same way. Meanwhile, Van thought since Puriel was cute, he could remember her name. Dee said they were honorable knights who served the Fertio noble family. They would serve Van, who would be in charge of Fertio's future. He said they protect Van there and also protect the future of Fertio. Esparta said when the expulsion was complete, he wanted Van to remember his duties and responsibilities as a noble. He told Van that it would end in 3 days. However, Van found it so long. He said then he would modify the area and execute the plan he proposed. First, he planned to create a barrier and attack from a distance. Dee and his knights were attacking from the left side, and Ortho and his comrades were attacking from the right side. Those who didn't attack would wait there in case of an emergency to prepare to move. Dee screamed Roger, and they all started to execute the plan. When the wall was finished, Dee and his knights and Ortho and his comrades were ready to march on. Ortho thought that Butler Old Man was more suited as a magician as he could fight to some extent. If he was a fourth element mage, he couldn't just be a butler. However, he thought, maybe under certain circumstances. Ordo said if Ortho had refused the young master's request back then, he really would have sacrificed his life. Ortho approved and said he was very valuable. No noble like him should die so soon. Ortho said if it was possible, he wanted that boy to become a lord. He said these past 2 weeks the impression of nobility in Ortho had completely changed. It turned out that there was such a person in a noble family. He was very interested in Van. He said if Van was in trouble, he would go to help him. But still, Ortho didn't know much about Van. The lord of a small village, that being said, was troublesome and made Ortho want to refuse. He risked his life to fulfill his responsibility, even though he was pressured to come to such a place. Not only the territory and its inhabitants, but also the knights, retired butlers, maids, and slaves. After all, they lived as adventurers to propose such a strategy to protect everyone so that no one died. An 8-year-old would choose to die just for his own sake. Van was really a weird boy for Ortho. When Van returned, Kamshin and Till hugged him and thanked God. Kamshin thought if something happened to Van, he would be the first to become Van's shield and then catch up with Van. Van felt like they were like his own family. He told them that they were in a battle and that if there was something they could do, just do it. Van ordered them to get the medicines and medical treatment kits out of the cart. Puriel said if conditions get dangerous, they will help out. That was all. And they again screamed Roger, then went back to fight. The bandits were at ease. The surrounding villages and settlements were falling apart and the attack on that small village was about to come to an end. While the bandits were planning what would they do after this attack, one of them got shot by an arrow, and it was from a wall behind them. Ortho and Dee were attacking at the same time, and Ortho was pretty amazed by Dee. The way he swung such a big sword with ease proved that he was the deputy knight commander of the Fertio family. The opponents were now terrified. They tried to run away and Ortho started chasing them until he noticed that one enemy was coming to them. He ordered everyone to stop him, but the long-range squad couldn't see the enemy coming because of the wall. He screamed that the enemy was coming, but it was a little late. Now Puriel was against the big guy. She had to use her magic, but she needed at least 10 seconds to start using it again and she couldn't make it. She was sure that she was going to be killed, but Van and Kamshin came. Puriel tried to explain to him that he was not an opponent that children could face, but they didn't listen to her and attacked him. After countless attacks, the enemy was defeated. Van stated that there was a chance the other opponents would attack here, so he told them to watch the front while Puriel was trying to figure out what the hell was wrong with this boy. After a while, some of them managed to escape, but the attacking squad had been cleared and nobody got hurt. They got the best results. After that, Ortho explained that this request would be completed if they got half of the guest fee. He was a little interested in something other than the money, so he asked if he could stay there a bit. The others had to refuse this because they had to work in the next territory, and this request ended here, but they would come back again. However, there were a few who wanted to go with him. There were dense forests and mountains wound here, so he could hunt demons without accepting quests for a long time, or he might be able to earn some money. Puriel mentioned how she didn't think Van was a noble's kid as he didn't look like one. That was the reason Ortho wanted to stay here, because he wondered what a child like him would become. Van had a sharp wit, and it was unnatural even if he was educated as a noble. At first glance, he looked like a child from a noble family, but once he opened his mouth, that image would disappear. He was polite and gentle, but often looked like a cheerful and friendly child. There was no pretense of looking down on the commoner even though he was a noble. He admitted that he had never seen a noble like him, and the other members seemed to agree with him. They recalled that before the battle, Van said that his magic was not suitable for battle. In other words, back then he was willing to sacrifice himself for everyone, which was not a noble-like decision. Puriel mentioned that Van also helped her when she was cornered. His movements didn't seem like a kid's, and it was like a knight that had been to many battles. However, this kid wasn't even 10 yet. He was mysterious, but was better than any noble they had ever known. Ortho wanted to see what the territory would be like if that became a lord. He asked his team if they were also curious to see that, and they were all okay with it. Till was bothering Van, saying he should let Kamshin go first next time. Kamshin was brainstorming that he had to become even stronger. Puriel came and apologized for interrupting. She commented on how Van was making girls cry even at his age, but Van responded that he tried to be sincere with her, especially since she was important to him. Puriel asked him if he was an elf because their children don't age like they look. She was still having doubts about what to call him as he was a noble even though he didn't act like one. Van responded that Till took care of him since he was a baby, and he thought he must be a human being. She then asked where he learned how to use a sword. He pointed at D, saying that he was directly trained by that person, even though he wasn't very developed. He was trained to be stronger than himself. She then asked if his knowledge and wit came from Esparta, and Van confirmed her. Puriel then kneeled, stating that she could keep her life thanks to Van's actions and his sword's strength. She was much obliged and she would never forget this gift. Van smiled and stated that it was not a problem. Puriel thought it would be a big problem if it was because of a noble's charisma, but here they were. An adventurer had won over an adventurer's heart. Esparta informed Van that the villagers were gathering around the entrance. That was Van's first meeting, so he wanted to make a good impression. In the next scene, villagers were gathered, and Van introduced himself to everyone. He said that he was sent here by the Lord of Foltio, who had recently been ruling this territory, including this village. From now on, he would rule this village. The elder of the village, Rhonda, came and expressed his gratitude for helping this village and their people. Van mentioned the rumors about the owners and soldiers in this village who don't take command. He said that he wanted to protect this village, so henceforth he was going to be in charge. He hoped for their understanding and help. Ortho found this too formal but did not say anything. Rhonda invited him over to his house as an answer to his kindness. When they went inside, he explained that there used to be 150 people in this village. Half a year ago last month, the village was attacked by bandits. So now there were only 100 people, and today was the third attack. Van asked why they have become a main target for them in his opinion. He said that it was probably because the border with the kingdom of Gerona was close to the village. The Knight of the Border Guard used to patrol the border during the time of Earl Ferdinand, but now that the Lord had changed, the border had been abandoned. In short, the village was threatened because it now belongs to Lord Feltio. Van said that the former ruler Count Ferdinand had supporters in every town. It appears to his father, Lord Feltio, appointed rulers only for the larger towns, and the situation of the small villages was still unknown. Putting them aside, a small village was a village that did not need to be protected, and it paid almost no taxes. Van stated that from now on, he would keep them informed, and there was no point in complaining, lamenting, or criticizing the state of this country. Even if they don't believe it, it doesn't change anything. Son of Rodgamalaga seemed angry after Van's words. Van told him to sit down as he spoke on behalf of this village while thinking how this village had no future with a person who had such a temper. Van mentioned that the founder of the kingdom, King Berlineth, might have left a flaw in the law. A silence continued after his statement. Esparta coughs to encourage him to say something. Van felt a little bit afraid, but he was still dedicated to ruling this village. He said that nothing can be changed by complaining about the laws of the kingdom and how it would be, but this village had them. There were 3 definite measures. First, they needed to create something of value that the kingdom couldn't ignore. Second was making money and hiring mercenaries regularly. Third, they were going to rebuild and develop this village themselves. The woman in there stated that they had also thought about this, but none of those could be accomplished so easily. If they were in such a remote place, even if they sell wood or stone, it would be impossible to make a profit. But because of their poor education, it would be difficult for them to produce handcrafts of varying value. And if so, they would not be able to make a profit. Van said that he knew it had not been easy for them, but now he was here, educated, and he was going to do everything he could to defend and develop this village. But he didn't get the reaction he expected, so Esparta interrupted. He said that Van had been entrusted with the management of the land even though he was 8 years old. But many people considered him a gifted child for this reason. Dee added that he, as the leader of the knighthood, had come to serve them faithfully, so he wanted them to allow him to join their troop. Now they seemed pretty impressed and emotional by their words. They then asked if Van possessed the 4 elements, but Van stopped them, saying that he had none of that, so they should not be expecting any combat power. First of all, they had to fortify the walls so no one could get in. The fence was strong, but it was made of wood and it was not resistant to fire. According to Espada, the stone would remain solid as long as magic was active, but later it would just be a lump of earth. Van told him to use the stones to reinforce the walls. He was sure they could make a solid wall in time. They also could use a moat and it would help keep the outlaws out. Dee volunteered for this job. He encourages the others to make some traps and prepare to attack from the wall. They would also need bows and arrows or stones, which were easier for the villagers. Van then went outside and told everyone his plan. He also promised to do his best for the development of the village. He said that even if he was a child, he had people behind him, and if the enemies came, they would fight. At the end of his speech, he realized that he looked like a politician. A man wanted to ask something. He asked what was going on with the taxes. They had been paying 30% on crops and monster skins and fangs. Van decided to make it 10%, and if it was not enough, he offered to pay it once. The villagers were shocked at his offer. He said that it was important to have a stable life. There were instances where people sold their children because of their debts. Some of them were also worried that the bandits would come back soon and wanted to call the knights, but he said that the message would take 2 weeks, so it was too late to call for help. They wouldn't even come because of the distance. The village people were angry that they would abandon them. Van understood their anger, but at present, he stated that the Marquis had neither the budget for the knights to defend a vast territory. Even if they could persuade the knights, they would be too few to help them. They needed 200 men. He asked Espad to build a wall behind a wooden fence, and he did it without questioning. The villagers were amazed. He said that they needed their help now more than ever, but if they joined them, this village would endure. They didn't have enough housing, so they rested in the wagon. Rhonda wanted to give up on his house, but they couldn't put him out on the street. Until now, Van had never complained that he only welded production magic. But recalling the memory of them being disappointed because he had no combat power was indeed bitter. He had tried to appeal to them, but the villagers were skeptical. He had to earn their trust for the success of the village and a happy life. He promised himself that he was going to protect the village and make it a good place for people to live. In the next chapter, Van, Dee, Esparta, and Rhonda were discussing. Van stated that if the enemy did not attack them, they could make the first attack. Usually from the walls, one's attacks with magic bows and arrows. Esparta responded that from a low wall, the attack wouldn't be that effective. Rhonda mentioned that they used to use spears to attack through gaps in the forest fortress. Dee responded, saying that enemies were in the same position now and they would be able to stab them with spears again. Van said the word catapult. Rhonda didn't know what he meant, but Esparta stated that the catapult was a siege weapon, and they couldn't use it to defend themselves. Dee explained to Rhonda that a catapult shoots huge boulders, but it was hard to tell where they would fall, and it takes time to recharge the catapult itself. However, the fortress walls and observation towers were big enough, so they could be easily destroyed with them. The range would be greater if they threw a box filled with small stones, and if they aimed it at the gate, their attack would be much more effective. Van also suggested putting bottles of oil and a torch in it, to set the ground on fire, which would make their offensive even stronger. Esparta asked curiously who created this mechanism, and apparently it was Van. But they didn't believe his production magic at all. Van didn't fully understand it himself either. On his way to the country, he often used it to learn how to freely change the shape of stones, wood, and metal. And now it was time to show everyone what he had learned. In the next scene, Van asks Ortho if he thinks they could occupy the village now because the opposition party has left. Ortho confirmed him and mentioned that he was going to stay in the village for a while to make some extra money hunting mythical monsters. He then stopped and sensed monsters here. He told Van that it could be dangerous here, so he should sit down in the nearby trees. Van was amazed at Orta's intuition. As he travels, he detects and destroys enemies you didn't even suspect. Despite his skill, he can't raise his level. Kamshin found an enormous tree, but Van said that was too big so they couldn't cut it down. He showed another tree, but that one was also too big. Van tried to use his skill. He couldn't imagine the shape clearly enough, so if he used magic, the new shape would be strange and fragile. The production magic was not easy to use. If he imagined a small part of it, he figured that he could be able to do what he wanted. At the bottom of his stomach, it gradually became warm and the power reached his fingertips. The image had to be as small as possible and detailed. He had to imagine even the fibers of the trees, and if he could, they would intertwine with each other and the cords would be able to form a tight knot. He felt like he had succeeded. When the fibers split into pieces and bind together, they would be transformed into a wooden cube. This cube was made of wood, but it looked like plastic. The fiber block had a stunning quality. It was stronger than wood under any treatment, so they were going to make a lot out of these blocks. Then they were planning to process it later after moving it to the coach first. Puriel came and asked if he collected wood. It was lighter and a lot harder than Ortho thought, which made it harder to break. Van told him to try breaking it to see how strong it was. Ortho hit the block repeatedly to break it, but there wasn't even a single crack on it. Van wondered which one was harder, the rock or the wood. Van was just happy that he found something very useful. At the carriage, he noticed that the magic power was depleted. Till asked if it had implications. He heard that magic was complicated, but it had logic. But looking at those things he created, Till noticed how skillfully crafted they were. Van was still trying to figure out how magic works. He has to imagine an entire weapon, its metal, its razor-sharp blades, and its shape. He created a sword and gave it to Kamshin, and he was so amazed that he promised to make it his family heirloom. He also created an axe and gave it to Till. He noticed Till's face and wondered if he didn't like this weapon. He seemed upset as he worked so hard on the axe to make it powerful so it couldn't be scratched or broken. Till tried to convince him that she loved axes and even hugged them. Van seemed convinced and was glad that she liked it. But on the inside, he actually knew she didn't, and promised to himself to make her some jewelry next time. He wondered if his magic power would improve the more he consumed. He then had an idea to use this unusually. In the next scene, they were pretty amazed at Esparta's skills. When Ortho stated that the butler was a good magician next to Van, he was a little flattered that they put him on the same level as Esparta. Puriel found him a little strange. This kind of mage was usually attracted to the army, and if he was an adventurer, he would be top-ranked. Van was just glad that he followed him even though he was about to retire. The future was as important to him as the past, and he hoped Esparta had a happy old age. While he was thinking positively about him, Esparta approached Van and stated that he was growing up, and now, as a lord, he have to take the responsibility and the weight of the title. He panicked and started to explain to him that the most important thing now was to strengthen the village defenses, and he promised to reinforce the gates while Esparta dragged him. He stopped and asked how he was planning to do that. D came and he was willing to pile up the stones. Being annoyed that everyone around here was acting stupid, Van stated that he was here to do something with magic. D noticed the mistake he made and told him that he admired him. They tried to convince Van that no matter how hard he worked, he couldn't do anything with magic. The gate was made from wood, so the process was similar to making ordinary wooden blocks. His only concern was the weight. The weight was the key to defending against the enemy. That was all they had got for now. Then they were going to make a heavy gate out of metal. Van concentrated and created an enormous gate that left everyone in shock. He told Ortho to cut this door with his sword, saying that it would repair itself. He wanted to test the power of the wall. Ortho used his all strength to cut the gate. It was indeed a powerful hit, but it only scratched a little. Van thought the wood was not the appropriate material, but the others immediately tried to object him. The next day he woke up from his sleep annoyed because sleeping in cramped quarters with only a sleeping bag was uncomfortable. He couldn't even wash up properly yet. On the way, they stayed overnight in camps and wagons. Even when they arrived in the village, they had to sleep in the carriage. When he went outside the carriage, Till and Kamshin greeted him. He was fine, but Till, Kamshin, and the others were much worse. They were too exhausted, and this situation couldn't go on like that. Before they start defending the village, they need to provide it with food, clothing, and housing. He decided to try to make a home. He told Kamsin to fetch the wooden blocks. Rhonda came and asked what were they doing. He explained that he wanted to build a house on this land and asked if it was safe and suitable. Rhonda said that it was the center of the village, so Van's mansion would look great. Van also thought about organizing a festival when they have some free time. He was strong enough, but he was still not sure if he would be able to build anything more than a house. For starters, he created 4 supporting beams, and then he would decide on the size. He had to pretend it was a wire and put it on the ground. The thicker the column, the better. Then he needed the floor and the walls, and only then could the roof be assembled. He pictured it in his head, but it seemed a lot bigger now. They needed interior walls. He used up all the blocks, but the house was done. It had a kitchen and a toilet, 1 big bedroom and a smaller one, and there were still 2 small rooms left. He had to use something with them because otherwise Espada would get mad. He put shutters on the windows. He would have to ask the dealers about the quartz sand. The house was done and was pretty big. Espada didn't think it was big. He actually thought it was a bit small, but it's still the biggest mansion around. It also didn't look like wood at all. Everyone was so amazed by Van's power. It was interesting magic, but he still thought strong attack magic was much bigger because the villagers should feel behind their lord like a stone wall. Till tried to object, saying she would rather live in his city than the Maquis of Jalpa. Espada stated that he was right when it comes to war, but in times of peace, people want a ruler who would make their lives better, and he can't think of anyone better suited to that role than him. The others came, and especially Dee was shocked. He couldn't believe Van built a house with magic in just a few seconds. Van mentioned that if they get more wood, he would be able to build houses for everyone. Dee ordered his men to get the food and use wagons if they needed it. Van actually had never seen anyone work with this much of a speed. Even Ortho was hyped up about this house, and he was willing to do the chopping. He also told everyone to not let the knights overtake them. Van was still confused because Ortho lived in the countryside, so he didn't need a house like that. After a while, Rhonda came with the villagers and mentioned the information that Van knew how to build houses. The people started expressing their house problems to Van just like Van thought. It was not going to be just one house. He regrets telling Dee about this, but he could see that the people had some pretty shabby houses. He eventually decided to do it and told them to get in the line and he would give them a new home. If his magic could make these people happy, he would have no choice. Espada and the villagers were building barricades. He, along with Mr. Ordo and the others, were logging timber. Van took Till and Camzen with him to build houses. He had already adapted to his power, so he could quite handle building these kinds of things. He would also want to design his own interior. He felt like he was doing someone else's orders. And it depressed him because it brought back memories of the period of corporate slavery. But once he started, he couldn't stop. Dee was still amazed at how great Van's store of magical power was. It took a lot of knowledge to build such a stunning mansion. The buildings were grouped into 4. The alleys and streets were arranged in a grid pattern. This type of building was called a building block. The houses of ordinary people were built uniformly so that there was not much difference. That was enough for now, but when they had the building stone, they would rebuild the houses individually for each family, although they were already very grateful for Van. They bow and offer their products as soon as they see him. In addition, he also erected a small and simple bathing house near the mansion. He actually made it for himself, but was still glad that the others also liked it. Pluriel used her water magic to purify the water, and her retro alternative to heat water with fire. Pluriel and Till asked Van to come with them to take a bath, but Van panicked and got embarrassed. Even though they knew him as an 8-year-old child, he was actually an adult in his 20s. He eventually took his bath alone and then went to his room, which was empty. It would be sad to use sleeping bags indoors, so he hurried up and made beds for everyone. At least he would make simple bedding out of the hay and straw the locals shared. Now that he was sleeping in a comfortable bed, he was happy. After a good night's sleep, he woke up and had a delicious breakfast with Till. It was so nice to have breakfast in his own home and have a carefree laugh with sweet Till. However, Espada informed Van that they needed to find a way to generate regular income. Currently, they come in once a month or so. From what he had learned, their only contact with the outside world right now was through merchants. Espada sounded so serious even though he had an omelet on his mustache. He didn't want to decide this at breakfast and felt a little annoyed at Espada. He stated that he could manage the house, the furniture, the clothes, and all the other household things. They have plenty of provisions. He was thinking about focusing on building up their defenses. But they didn't have any spices, as Espada said. He also mentioned that they didn't have the ingredients for his favorite sweet-baked goods. Van was furious after hearing that. He decided to make something for sale in this village right now and asked for ideas. Camzen suggested wooden blocks made by Van, but it was overruled because he was the only one capable of making them. Till suggested going on a monster hunt and getting some useful materials, which Van found overruled again because Otto and the others hunt as it was. But what the hunters got was their one. It was not the property of the village. In that case, Espada said that the solution should be to sell the harvest, but given the peculiarities of this village, there were difficulties, and it was not a way to generate income in the short term anyway. They had to think which way would be best for them. Zara was sure that Van was in love. He already suggested to them to try it out to find out how it works. He was in charge of diffusing traps, but he mentioned that they were worried about spoiling Van's precious gift. Zara said that it would be alright, seeing Camzen's and Till's worried faces. Zara showed them an oak tightly lined with leather on the inside and the edges, making it strong and resilient. He told Camzen to try, and when he hit it, it was too weak, so he was about to tell him that he should hit harder. However, the oak split in half like a piece of paper. They were all stunned. Zara started crying as his brand new oak was just broken. He was even more shocked when he learned that it was just a wooden weapon. Van told him to hold it and he would make it sturdier than before. He actually did make it. Orto came and asked what they were doing. Seeing Van there, he asked if he thought they could sell this one. There were quite a lot of powerful evil spirits deep in the woods, which was probably because of the Wolf's Mountains. He mentioned that they could mine rare minerals without going into the mountains. It was iron ore, but there was also silver and copper and some gold. And also he showed him the mithril ore. Van was thrilled by this. They were indeed lucky to be able to find those in the woods. Ordo had a suggestion. Until now, the problem with extraction had been great remoteness and the difficult terrain. It seemed the only thing that had been attempted here was nightly expeditions. And for them, herbs and minerals were of little interest. Van said it was a good chance for experienced adventurers to set up mining operations. And if there were rich deposits in the foothills, there would definitely be more to discover in the Wolfsburg Mountains themselves. First, he recycles the iron ore. In the case of wood, the recycling process was evenly distributed among the layers. But in the case of iron ore, there were parts to which magic penetrates gradually and there were parts that it deals with instantly. They need to convert the easily recyclable parts into sand. 1/3 of the original size was left. To check the quality, it should be melted down and purified because he didn't know how pure the ore was originally. Zara heatedly asked Van if he would try forging a sword out of the ore. A thin, double-edged sword was even enough. Ordo wondered if he really liked swords that much or iron weapons in general. Van said that since Zara brought him the ore, he would make weapons for all adventurers. Hearing this beautiful news, he wanted to have a dagger and one long sword. Van concentrated and started creating the first iron weapon. The thickness of blade was thicker than a katana, but the cutting part of the blade must be extremely sharp. He believed the density of the metal also plays a role. All that was left to do was to put it all together and fasten it. After a few seconds, he was holding the sword. It didn't take long, and it was not because he was skipping steps for the sake of speed. It was a demonstrable result of the growth of his skills. He handed the sword to Zara and he was so happy that he let out a scream. While they were all trying to see the new sword he made, Van wanted to make it longer, and in the same design without being bothered by the voices. He successfully made a sharp and powerful sword and gave it to Zara. Seeing Zara's weapons, the other adventurers were in demand to have new weapons made by Van. As for his weapons, Puriel stated that it was hard to say for sure until it had been tried out, but it could be sold for quite a high price. Espada said it was really quite a novelty. Ore deposits in the middle of the forest, not in the mountains, are rare. Iron sand was more often. It seemed that the ore contained in these rocks was very rare. The expectations were golems of stone, iron, and other ores. So if there were dungeons nearby, that would explain everything. Ordo's team had never stumbled across anything like that. Zara wondered the possibility of the remains of golems destroyed a long time ago. Ordo asked if there were any dungeons around there, but they didn't know yet. They have not explored the area, so it might have been somewhere. Espada stated that if a dungeon was discovered, their business would change dramatically, and this village would generate an abundance of trade. Van smiled a little, and he seemed to like the possibility of the village's importance increasing dramatically thanks to the new dungeon he might find. Dungeons were a real treasure trove of resources. Most of the weapons, jewels, and other artifacts of the country were obtained from the dungeons. They were therefore important. Members of the Adventurers Guild were obligated to report to the guild if they ever found a new dungeon. The guild that receives a report of a new dungeon has the right to open a branch in the nearest settlement. Discovering a new dungeon was a great achievement for an adventurer. It was a good opportunity to make a name for yourself. You could even get into the circles of the best adventurers. You could also get the right to be the first to explore a new dungeon. Van said, under the current circumstances, if this village passes on the dungeon report, it was unlikely they would be able to afford to accept guild members. Espada confirmed him and added that the village would be fooled by adventurers, merchants, and even knights. There was a shortage of food and other resources, and there was also the possibility of an attack by a neighboring country that Ferdinand would most likely invade. Ortho asked if they should search the dungeon, but they would be expelled for that. Puriel stated that as soon as they found out about the dungeon, they would send knights here. So with Van's magic, the construction production problem would be solved in the blink of an eye. Van said that he impeded the Fertile family. If they get the chance, they will get rid of him. So they must first expand and develop this village before claiming the dungeon, then the Fertile family wouldn't be able to do anything. Ortho told the other to explore the area where the dungeon might be and go around it when they were gathering resources. It was not profitable to claim the dungeon now, but Van was hoping that they would be rewarded. Dungeons were important to the country as well as the aristocracy. Van's family thinks he is useless and they have no plans for his future. If he claimed the dungeon now, it would simply be offered to one of his brothers. That was the reason why he had to use his power, so that no one else could have this village. While walking with Till, Van said that the housing situation was good for now, and their next thing was financing and providing for the defense. Till wondered if his magical power still going strong, and Van confessed that he was getting tired. When he gets tired, he won't do anything. They needed the labor force, but there were few people here who knew how to work with their hands. He would like to create a stock of weapons and shields even before the arrival of traders. The defense was just as important. The outer wall was almost complete. H had laid out stones and managed to make those walls as strong as concrete. At first, he did not have enough height and thickness, but he solved this problem. And on the wall itself, he put a simple ballista using leather in the manufacture. It was equipped with a big shield at the front, letting them fire huge bolts without fear of enemy counterattacks. He placed towers around the perimeter of the village on which he also installed ballistas. Till went to get dinner, and when she left, Van thanked Kamsin. However, he noticed something was off, so he asked. Kamsin said that he just brought him the stones and he transformed the village so easily. He seemed like he was still trying to process his power. Van said that as a lord it was his duty to work for the good of the village. He asked if Kamsin aspired to anything. Kamsin's goal was to protect Van. Van seemed to feel his dedication but asked him politely to not overdo it. He knew that Kamsin was always so straightforward and cared about him. Next time he decided to make him armor. His dear knight needed the fine armor that would keep him safe in times of trouble. For 3 days he worked hard and the village now looked like a small fortress. Van found it perfect, but he asked where else they could see such a well-protected village, but there was nowhere. Espada didn't even think they could call it a village. It was more like a small fortress, and now there was no way for bandits to get behind those walls. Dee thought about the possible scenario if Jalpa realized the power of Master Van. Espada disagreed, saying that the head of the house considered it paramount to be able to fight. There was no point in discussing it now. But Dee said that there it was not impossible to use Master Wang's abilities in battle, and if they give him time, he would be stronger than anyone else. They started to argue, so Van had to interrupt, saying that it was meaningless to regret circumstances or what kind of talent he was born with, and what was important was to be able to adapt and live with what was given to you by fate. He decided to quote some phrases he had heard before, and it seemed like they liked it. Dee started laughing and agreed to Van. As the atmosphere was getting more cheerful, it was time to work. The ditches have just been dug and haven't been filled with water yet. A ditch with water was perfect for defense. There was even something aesthetic about it. He didn't think they should forget about drinking water. It was necessary to reinforce the bottom and walls of the ditch, and they needed to provide a water supply route. Now they go to the river for water or filter the rainwater they managed to collect. While he was thinking about having a more reliable source of water, he heard a noise behind him. The bandits were here. They were already coming from the other side. Van told them to raise the bridge and close the gate. He asked if there was anyone left outside and sent someone to check it. It had only been a few days and they were already obeying his orders without hesitation. Except, they were still afraid to fight. It was the same in the last battle. He was also a little scared himself. As a lord, he couldn't afford to look scared. He acknowledged their fear and stated that it was possible that some of them would suffer. However, this was an important battle for the future of the village, and that's why he would fight for it. He said that he couldn't do it alone and asked for their help. Van's encouraging words seemed to work on those people, and they didn't seem like they were afraid of anything now. Van started to give his orders, and before he went to fight, Till grabbed him. Seeing Till's torn eyes, he told Dee to take his men and find out what the enemy was planning. Dee, with a lot of confidence, told him to rely on him and that he was an outstanding leader and genius, and generally the best of the best. Even if the advantage was not on his side, even if he was surrounded, Dee believed that he would be successful. He was proud of the fact that he had more success than Commander Stradale, and now he was going to serve Van. He trusted him and was willing to risk his life. Dee asked about the situation, and his man explained that it finally became clear what kind of groups were out there in the distance, which looked like bandits. He noticed that they were heading there and informed Van about this. He also mentioned that they were a few hundred yards away. They have to get ready to defend themselves. Van asked if someone was following them, which was also a possibility. While they were thinking about the possibilities, one of them saw a tail. It was a bunch of armored dragons coming towards them. The situation was not good. It was hard for an experienced knight to fight an armored dragon, and there was not a single experienced fighter in this village. It looked like those armored dragons were chasing the bandits right at them, and there was no way to penetrate them with ordinary weapons. This magic was effective, but the only mages who could fight now were Espada and that adventurer's daughter. And the adventurers themselves had gone after the materials. Even if there was no mage, a heavy knight could slow him down and then hit him where he was weak, but locals wouldn't be able to do that. They can't withstand a tail and claw attack. Van ordered everyone to get behind the ballistas and put the ballista bolts nearby. Dee also told everyone to listen to Van and follow his orders. People were running away from the dragon screaming for help. There was no end in sight, and this kind of attack was hard to repel even in a big city. Dee calculated that there were about 40 armored dragons 8 meters in length, and they could use the bandits as bait. But Van felt sorry for them and asked if there was any other way to do this. This made Dee laugh, and he apologized. He thinks that it is better to relax and laugh in the face of danger in a tight spot like that, and you will just find a solution. He told everyone to aim for the dragons, shooting them when the bandits jumped into the moat. Van asked if the bandits at this distance could handle him, and they confirmed him. Even if hitting their eyes or mouths would be fine and they would have a better chance then. Dee stated with great confidence that none of them would die today and that they were going to win this battle. "We will have dragon barbecue for dinner tonight," he said confidently. In the next scene, the bandits are running towards the village in fear of the dragons chasing them. Seeing they were close enough, Dee told his men to be ready. Even though he didn't show it, he was aware of how challenging the situation they were in was. He ordered his men who had the catapult ready to fire it. Even though the arrows fired reached the dragons, they seemed to vanish and have no effect. But what happened was that the arrows Van created actually pierced the dragons' bodies. The arrow hit the paw of the armored dragon who was behind. The dragon also broke its paw and stuck it into the ground. Obviously, they did not kill much, but this was something that they did not expect. When Van asked Dee what was going on, Dee told him he had done something amazing, but he didn't seem to understand much. Dee explained that they killed about 10 armored dragons in one volley. He also stated that they didn't have arrows anymore and that they needed to bring them from the unused ballista. Van had an idea and he told him to use a wooden one if there wasn't any iron left. Dee gave the order and told his men to get ready. After one volley, everyone already gained confidence so people would be sure of victory. The second salvo would be even more accurate. The people on the watchtowers had also set up and taken positions. There was no doubt for Dee that they would gain victory. He ordered them to fire the arrows to show the power of this village. The painful screams of dragons could be heard by everyone. The wooden arrows managed to break them. Although the result was not the same as iron's, it turned out to pierce such a thick scale. Dee ordered everyone to use wooden arrows, aim, and fire. After a few times, all the dragons were dead, and the victory was with them. Defeating at least 40 dragons with only 60 arrows was not something Commander Stradale would believe. Dee was proud of Van. He went to Van and Van seemed so happy. It was Van's first time seeing the dragon, so he was a little surprised. As he called them dinosaurs, Dee started laughing because he didn't even know what those were. Dee expressed his joy by dragging Van from place to place with the happiness of winning. Van noticed that there were people outside the gate, and Dee informed him that 30 people survived. Dee told them to tie them up and warned them to not do anything other than what they said. The bandits were so scared that they were even willing to be slaves to them. They begged them to hire them. Rhonda stated that those people often plundered their village. The villagers were also angry and started attacking them as they killed some of their family. Just before one of them hit the bandits, Van held his fist as he didn't want him to get his hands dirty. He said that they would be punished, so he didn't need to do the same bad thing to them, just like they did. He then turned to the bandits and stated that they would still have to suffer punishment. As soon as someone comes here, they will be taken away. Until then, he wanted them to contribute for the sake of the village. They gave them the job of weeding out the dragon to get the magic core. Ortho was so amazed by the things that happened in the past week that he was sure it would last for the rest of his life. Phil and Zara were also impressed by the weapons. Even if 30 people use Van's perfect swords, 4 or 5 bodies for a day was the maximum. They had to be on time, so Ortho decided to butcher it while it was still fresh. From the next day, Dee, Orta's team, Kamshin's team, and the Free People dealt with carcasses. Van had changed the material of the cleaning knife, so now it was sharper. The team finished after 3 days. Then the next night, Van made a speech. He thanked the villagers and everyone for working hard for the village. Now they didn't have to worry about money and could use any seasoning. He prepared a feast for everyone and told them to drink no more than 2 glasses. Van was also enjoying the dragon meat, even when grilled crispy. The texture of the meat was juicy and soft and flew through his tongue. Ortho mentioned that the meat inside was fatty and tasty because it was protected by a hard shell. Dragons were expensive, that's why they sell them. Now Ordo made sure that the ballista arrows were as powerful as the weapons he made for them. Dee overheard this statement and was devastated that Van didn't give him a sword. While the adventurers were pleased by their weapons, Dee and his team surrounded Van asking for swords and daggers. Van was overwhelmed by Dee and his team, and people who were thanking and offering him food but did not change his attitude. The villagers found him strange as he still went over to his side even though he was in for a hard life. It was the one who was about to attack the bandits for killing his family, and he was grateful to Van for stopping him. He decided to try making this village better for the sake of the deceased families. Rhonda and his helper Aldo seemed to enjoy the fest. The woman was happy that they were able to gather together even with aristocrats. Espada stated that it might be a problem if she thinks like an aristocrat, but that was part of Van's charm. Till looked at Van, and she realized that Van was about to do more amazing things in the future. In the next scene, Ortho, Van, and the others are talking about selling the dragons. Ortho stated that for 1 dragon with a shell, the merchants would give them 20 gold coins. As most of the meat was rotten, they wouldn't be able to sell it, and considering the transport costs for the rest of the body, they would be able to get about 8 coins. They had 30 bodies, so in the end, they would get more than 300 coins. Van converted it to yen inside his head, and it was more than 300 million. Espada congratulated him on his successful defense. Van didn't forget the assistance with a protective barrier Espada gave them, so he was also thankful for him. Espada pointed out that even though the results were wonderful, there was a law according to which a village or city that had earned more than 100 gold coins must pay a tax of 50% to the treasury of the Marquis. This meant that they would also learn about the state of the village. Espada briefly told him that even if it would be difficult to keep it a secret, it wasn't impossible. Van was stunned. He hadn't seen anyone who had served the Marquis for decades with the same devotion as Espada, and now he was proposing a method to deceive his father. This case was different from the dungeon. This time, to hide the truth, they would act covertly, and it would be a betrayal to his father. However, his father preferred a peaceful life without his son, so Van asked what his plan was. Firstly, he was going to report it to his older brother Murcia, crediting him with the dragons. An order of knighthood would not do, therefore he offered Hessians and adventurers. They stumbled upon a herd, but it was in the forest, so he could pretend that they destroyed it individually. Throwing him away, 3 older brothers claimed to be the head of the family. Everyone was trying to curry favor, and he wanted Murcia, who had supported him to this day, to win. Van made his decision and stated how great Espada's plan was. The next morning, Van was greeted by everyone he had seen in the village. While they were praising him, Van held Till's hand. Till was surprised at first, but she was happy that he wanted affection. Van behaved like an adult in the bathing situation, but he was still 8 years old, so he was using his child privilege. However, after a while, he decided to let her hand go because of his dignity. But thinking about Till leaving him one day did not please him. However, he wanted to focus on her happiness now. Van was about to say something about Till's future partner, but Till interrupted him, saying that she wanted to take care of him to keep being with him, and that's why she had never thought about this topic. They went to the gate, and Van asked the guardians if they had spotted something. It was merchants. It was Mr. Bell and Mr. Lango. Van barely made out the black silhouettes, but this man could even see their faces. Just in case, Van told them to raise the bridge and prepare the ballista. They tried to explain to him that they weren't bandits, but they could be in the wagon and around it, and not just merchants and the convoy. Bandits could threaten their people, so he was not taking any risks. He told Kamshin to call Orto and D. They got to do a lot of things, and it depends on him how effectively he would use each opportunity. Finally, the time he was waiting for had come. Meanwhile, the merchants got stuck. The man inside said that the wagon broke down on the road, which was why a lot of products became unusable. He told the driver to consider the repair costs, the cost of the stay, and the convoy. Even after returning to the Hashimura, they didn't get a lot of money from the seller. The bald one called the man who was speaking, and he asked if it was Hashimura. He said that no matter how he looked, this place did not seem like a village at all. He asked if they missed the way, but there was no way. While they were arguing, Van greeted them from the top of the gate. He introduced himself as the owner of the village, Vanni Furto. He said that if they were really a trader, they must list the name of their trading company and their names, and if they were an escort, they must state their position and names. Hearing his name, the merchants were a little nervous. The two weren't really sure, but the bald one stated that their stronghold was the largest city, so they saw it several times. It was definitely him. The driver was shocked at how young Van was. He knew geniuses were shunned, but not so much that the Marquis personally sent him to the border. They started introducing themselves. The one who used the carriage was Mary Bell, a merchant, just like his brother Lango. The other guy was a security guard at Adventurer Air. Van asked Ordo if he knew anyone, and he said that they had been meeting in the Adventure Guild and also drinking together. Van permitted them to enter the village and welcomed them. When they entered the village, Rhonda and the others greeted them. Bell and Lango apologized to Rhonda for not coming back for so long and expressed their happiness about their wellness. Van came and apologized for the detention. He introduced himself once again. He asked quickly if they could sell them dragon shell parts, and they both seemed pretty excited because even adventurers hate to fight such strong beasts. The brothers were about to sob from happiness. Van offered to take them to the warehouse. When they arrived, Bell and Lango's jaws were on the floor after seeing 23rd meter steps of material from armored dragons. Van explained that they pacified about 40 dragons with shells and arrested about 30 people. Then they thought about leaving these people to help move stuff. He also stated that their wagon was restored. Processing the situation here, Bell stated that they have to call people for trade as soon as possible. He asked Van if they could wait until they do something about it within a month, and it was fine for Van. He also mentioned that they didn't need to think about it at the moment because it was time to eat delicious meat. Bell figured that this amount of meat would be too much for the consumption of the village, which meant it would rot. So he asked if Van would mind if they took the meat to the neighboring village for sale, and they could reimburse the price. Van asked if the neighboring village could afford to buy such meat. Bell said that this was a poor village, but this year, after paying taxes, they probably wouldn't have any savings left, and they asked them about products. Food in the village must be running out. If they give at least some of the meat for free, it would help somehow, as Bell thought. Van said that they were going to give it for free. He said that even though Bell was a trader, he didn't think profit was the main thing for him. Bell was amazed by Van's sharp brain. He mentioned that they would also pay him a good price for bandits. In this case, their profit would be almost non-existent, but at least it was a paycheck. Van thanked him and told him to come to this village in the future, and he promised him a deal he wouldn't regret, such as good quality armor. Bell seemed surprised once again, and asked if he also bring a blacksmith in addition to a highly qualified draftsman and carpenter. Van answered him with his cute smile. When he showed them the armor he made, they were indeed in shock. Bell hadn't figured out the intricacies of the advantages and disadvantages of weapons, but as an exhibit, it was excellent. Ordo gave him a dragon skin to test it, and it cut off with no problem. The Guardianaire was thrilled and wanted to buy them. Bell also expressed his surprise about so many amazing possibilities that Van offered to him, but he unwillingly stated that they can't get that many. It was okay with Van, and he told him that he could always buy it later. They continued to walk around the village, and Van showed them the new things he did in the village. After that, they gave them delicious dragon meat. Bell asked if merchants come here once a month and added that he could talk to the trade group and increase the number of visits to 2. Van mentioned that they needed some supplies and sake. One good meal was enough to make the villagers more cheerful. In addition, he ordered an advertisement for their weapons if possible. He figured that those brothers were thinking about an exclusive sale, which was a good thing. He said if 2 people always trade along the same route and organize themselves to sell weapons, they would soon reach their village. They could come up with ads, so the more they sell, the more they get. Hearing this, the brothers seemed interested. Van said that they should open a village shop. If it were possible to negotiate with the owner of the enterprise or traders or with anyone, it would be great, as Van said. Bell and Lango were overflowing with happiness after hearing the idea of a stable income and the opportunity to have their store. Van was even thinking about building a house for them. If they agree, the shop saves him time because he wouldn't have to negotiate with various merchants. Besides, it would be the first shop here. The deal was beneficial for both parties. Bell told his brother to go and discuss the proposal with the boss. Before they left, he said to Van that he would work here in a store in this village until things got better. They shook hands, and the negotiations were a great success. After that, Lango with the adventurers left the village fast to convince the Chamber of Commerce to get them labor and materials. What will help convince the Chamber of Commerce is his sword, the skin of the dragon, and the magic core. He also asked him to send his brother Mercia a letter which would give him all the achievements. Besides, near the village entrance, he builds a shop for Bell. Bell was sweating and crying out for happiness. Van explained that the first floor was the shop, the second floor would be a place to live, and the underground would be a warehouse space. He tried to do the same as the instruction that Bell asked. Bell did believe in his powers, but did not expect him to have this much power in the palm of his hands. The products must be done within 2 weeks, so the deals with Bell's shop are done for now. In the second half of the day, they went out from the village to the river. After walking for a while, Till asked if he was tired, but he told everyone to keep moving. Kamshin was moving in front of them to clear the road for them. The trust was that Van wanted to show his care and kindness to everyone, but he couldn't maintain his strength because Kamshin was strong. The way from the village took an hour, and then in front of them was a long and beautiful river where they had to get water. With that, the construction of the water supply had started. Espada, with the help of his magic, dug tens of meters in an instant. When he takes a break, D, Kamshin, and the other guts dig on their own. He followed everyone behind and strengthened the walls. The amount of Espada's magical power could be a surprise. D was also working with dedication even though he was almost 40. Till commented on how hard their job was considering the distance between the river and the village. But without water, they wouldn't be able to survive. The job was hard, but he thought that working together to reach the goal was great. In addition to the barrier, there was a satisfaction that one cannot enjoy alone. If living conditions were improved, then life itself would become better, and it would be easier for merchants and other people to come here. That was his goal for a comfortable life here. After 8 hours of digging, he could finally see the village. It was supposed to take about a week, but their pace was amazing. Van told them to stop for today. Espada and D seemed surprised because if they kept up, they would reach the village after a few hours. Van told D to look at Abu, Lu, and Kamzin. D thought he found a good training method but agreed with Van. It was really scary to see the hidden strength of the older generation and veterans. The next day, to their surprise, they dug into the village before the end of the morning, and then it was time to let the water through. Van thanked them for their great contribution. They opened up and the water started flowing with a wave of great peace. Children and villagers were very happy when they saw the water reaching their village. Rhonda also seemed happy about the time and effort savings they made. But to drink this water, they still need to filter and boil it, and for this they needed a special instrument. Lou came, and apparently he was interested in what instrument Van was about to create. Van suggested creating together with him, and he accepted it immediately. The filtering machine was made of branches, leaves, sand, soil, stones, and clothes, and would be located at the end of the canal drawn towards the village. The water coming out of there would be stored directly in the metal gear. The required amount of water would be drawn from the tap installed under the water tank and moved out to the boiler. And the fire for the boiler kindles itself with a fire magic crystal. Lou decided to go to Bell and get info if he had them in the shop. Kamshin came and informed him that water filled the space. Van was satisfied with the result. He wondered if there would be flooding if the water level rose due to rain. Espada seemed surprised that he noticed it. He said that essentially depending on the volume of water, the channel was widened and embankments were built in those places where it often floods. But those waterways required ingenuity. The water did not have a place to go out. Van needs to make sure that it can return to the river if it overflows or makes a lake behind the village. Returning the water to the river was a good idea for Espada, but he explained that the idea of creating a lake could be wonderful. In times of lack of precipitation and there was no water coming from the river, the reservoir was priceless. Van wondered if they would be fine if they had measures to prevent flooding, and Espada confirmed him. A lake must be built 200 meters from the backside of the village. This was a forced, urgent project before the rains came. In 3 days the lake was almost done and he wanted to put a spillway or something like that, but he needed to think about how they would use it in practice. So far, Van was just a happy boy to have a large amount of water. In the next scene, Van was nervous and grumpy. He woke up even before the sun rose, and apparently many people including Rhonda were in a panic. Dee and Espada had already headed to Lake Van, which Van had no idea who named it. Till explained that the lake was called like that in honor of his merit and to preserve the legacy for future generations, wherein the village changed its name to Van Village. Van didn't have a good feeling about this. He felt like it was not quite right. Before they discussed this issue, one of the villagers came in panic and told him to come. Van and Till immediately headed to the lake. It looked like they were going through the passage from the backside. When they arrived at the village, lots of people were gathered in worry. Van asked what was going on and they showed him the thing inside the lake. It looked like there was a person inside the lake looking at them. In a deep forest in the river, there was a mythical animal with perfect blue hair. They were half people, half mermaids, and they were called Ab Galoo. Van had never heard of them, so Espada explained that they couldn't see them so easily, and that girl was Ab Galoo. Van asked her name, but there was no answer. It looked like she didn't understand. Van told Till and Cam to bring some meat and fruits. First, what they needed for a relationship was food, as he thought. The girl slowly approached them, and everyone held their breath. After smelling the food, she asked if she could eat. Van was so surprised that he accidentally scared her out, so she went away once again. He apologized and asked her to swim back. He offered the meat and the fruits, and she started eating. After tasting the meat, she frowned and asked who caught the dragon meat. Dee, Ortho, and everyone else stated that it was Van, even though it was actually the ballistic. After hearing that, the girl swam away and disappeared, leaving everyone in shock. The next day, Till busted into Van's room screaming for his name. She said that there was a message from villagers about the attack, and everyone was panicking. Hearing the word attack was enough to wake him up. While he was wearing his clothes, Till explained that she heard the enemy already occupied the water channel. Van didn't expect them to get close, but he was sure they would leave after they saw their ballistics. His sleep was disturbed, so he was grumpy. However, when he went outside and looked at the enemy, there were lots of Ab Galoo looking at him. Yesterday there was a child, but today there were men and women of different ages, but all of them looked younger. The most aged one among them wanted to talk to Van. Van feared him, so he asked Dee, Ordo, and Espada to come with him. Bell was also there and informed Van that Ab Galoo brought some rare things and customers say that business with them was huge, so it would be a great idea. He wanted to take a closer look, so Van let him go too. They went down and the man who wanted to talk to Van stated that his daughter was grateful to him. He said that he heard the boy defeat the dragon and it looked like it was true. The other Abgalis seemed surprised. They wondered if he was a powerful mage. They also seemed to notice there were strong guys close to him. The man admitted that he was a brave human. He said that he accepted the marriage between him and Lada Priora. After a moment of silence, Van expressed his surprise, unlike the ones who completely froze behind him. He had so many questions in his head, such as what the hell this man was talking about, who was Lada Priora, and what the hell was marriage. The man, apparently he was the father of Lada Priora. Lada Vesta asked if he didn't accept it. Van asked where she was, and she was the one who played with her friends. Van asked how long have he been talking about marriage as she was still a kid. Vesta said that they were the Lada race and they hadn't spoken with people before. But the last time their river became a place for dragons with Sheld, their teammates died, so they were looking for a strong husband for Lotta Priora, who would like to save them. Van now figured that they were just looking for strong people for their safety, just like aristocrats using marriage for political things. Van stated that she must marry the guy she loves. He also stated firmly that they would protect them without marriage. In this case, Vesta stated that they would live with their son-in-law and asked if he was the owner of this water. Van said that he was not the owner and asked if they could move on to the lake because there were bridges, and if there would be guests or merchants they could scare them. He then realized that he called him his son-in-law. He tried to explain to him that he didn't accept the marriage, but they were already going, and Priora called him his husband. Espada stated that he was lucky that he got a friendship with Abdallah, but the first wife of Van was Ab Galoo. Till was okay with it if it was Van's choice. But even if he didn't accept it, the husband's revolt failed. Abdallahs were enjoying their time in the lake while Van was wondering if he needed to take a look at them as the owner of the lake. Following this through, he builds 2 buildings similar to Feelings as a place to relax. Thanks to the roof and walls, they could safely spend time. Van was happy that they liked it. Espada hadn't heard that the Scuderia were buildings of this kind. Van had a store of knowledge that even Espada didn't know, so this was impressive for him. The villagers started to contact Ab Galoo and share grain and meals. Suddenly, people began to talk about the fact that the Ingalls began to bring ores. Their friendship was getting better and better. Van decided to build one more wall, more powerful than the previous one, so big that it would be able to fence the lake and fortify the village for Ab Galoo security. Espada stated that it would be nice to build fixtures in a decimal city for future development. Van asked if it would be big to build a city for 10,000 people. Looking for village progress wouldn't be enough, and if they built a wall, they would need guards to protect it. So his advice was to build for so many people, but the territory will be smaller. He wondered what would happen if a variant was better with 1 or 2,000 people, but Espada did not agree. He said that he would need to spend more time on it later, and that was something he needed to consider first, and it would not happen. Espada is stubborn, and when he speaks his mind, even his father cannot speak back to him. Espada continued to explain to him that ideally, the length of each part should be at least 600 meters, considering that it would contain fortifications, houses, and bases and various guilds. The time for the wall build would start in the future when you will have enough people. Now we can build a wall in such a form that would like to upgrade in the future, Espada said. At the moment, Van was looking for a variant with a non-square fortified city. Espada said that there were a lot of times when the mage was able to push through one point of attack, and the square city was the most effective variant due to the simple way of defense. Just like a star-like city, it was a triangular part that even if you defeated it, you wouldn't be able to get to the city. The road connected to the city wall but could be separated from the wall side. Afterward, they didn't need to hurry and attack corners before they reached the main part. Even if they ignore them and try to destroy walls, they would get concentrated attacks from 3 sides. It was a form of strengthening that was created on the Earth when guns were created, but it would work in this world of sword and magic. Espada continued, saying that if he attacked from the front, he would concentrate his attack, but if the attack was from corners, he couldn't spread out to the left or right. That's why he needed more people. It was a very good form, he said. In this case, even good mages wouldn't be able to line up the infantry to be shielded. While they were talking, someone came into the room and told Van that a messenger arrived from Count Ferdinand. There was not only an emblem of Count Ferdinand, there was a unicorn emblem and shield of Viscount Cayenne, a rising nobleman from the faction of Count. Count Ferdinand was the owner of the city, so Van guessed that he might want it back. At the front gate, a little girl and a woman were standing, and they did not seem to like the rumors about the so-called child prodigy. That is the end of the recap for now. Please read the pinned comment about the next part.